So, hi everyone, welcome. And I'm here with Arren Khan, who's the Managing Director of the Digital Debt Resolution Agency, and Dan Calcott as well, who's the Director of the Digital Debt Resolution Agency. So guys, thanks very much. Welcome and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
So really interested to find out your perspective. I mean, digital's been a big trend recently, and just find out a little bit about, obviously, like what's happening in the digital collection space and why you kind of think it's important now, really.
Yeah, so I think the whole digital theme has been a hot topic for quite a while now, as you said, quite a few years. The pandemic only accelerated that, and we're definitely seeing a shift in consumer trends to interact online. And we kind of feel that managing your debt and discussing debt and resolving accounts should be dealt with in exactly the same way. So it's more of the preferences of consumers are changing. So the way that we engage with those consumers and interact with those consumers has got to fit as well. And it also, when it comes to a sensitive subject like debt, what you find is the digital channels and the digital aspect to it kind of help open that door to the conversation, make it a bit easier for people to engage. And well, that's what we're finding anyway.
So have you been finding that in terms of like engagement levels have been higher when you've done it digitally than maybe what you've seen before when you've been doing it through, I don't know, telephony or face-to-face kind of based interaction?
Yeah, so with engagement rates, obviously we've done a lot of different work to help with that around the branding and the language we use as well. But in terms of digital contact channels helping engagement, yes, definitely, because you'd find a conversation that over the telephone could be deemed quite embarrassing to discuss about being financially vulnerable, for example, or struggling with specific bills. People tend to find those conversations difficult and embarrassing, and via your digital channels, your web chat, your WhatsApp, your texting, it's a little bit easier. It eliminates that the human face to it that would usually make it embarrassing. But we're able to do it in a way that we're still able to effectively manage that account and help that customer.
Yeah, I think adding to that as well, that there is a negative stigma associated with our industry, rightly or wrongly. Digital Debt Resolution Agency, we're trying to change that ethos by putting the customer first, which they are like in every other industry. Because most people aren't in debt because they choose to be. 99% of people aren't, especially if you consider that this pandemic. Some people are in debt that have never been in debt before. So, and typically we're introduced as the bad guys. You get escalated to a debt collection agency. So, by having digital channels, it kind of breaks down that barrier. So people feel a lot more, comfortable speaking with us or dealing with it in a channel that's, fully auditable, for example, if it's WhatsApp. Also, it's on their own terms. It gives them back the control that they probably lost from before when they were just, I guess, spiraling into the sum of arrears and then eventually, in most cases, default. So it's giving them a bit of control back that they've lost.
Yeah. So I mean, I know a lot of players have been sort of investing in digital for a long time. I mean, what's your sort of state of view on the state of evolution of the industry? I mean, certainly from a customer care point of view, there's been investments in digital. I mean, to an extent, there's been investment in collections. I mean, do you think we've really made enough of it? I mean, obviously, you guys have come in with a digital proposition. I mean, where do you think the gaps have been?
It's hard. Obviously, I've worked in debt collection for about 12 years, and you come across various different other firms. So it's hard really to comment on what they aren't doing. You have an idea, but I think for us, we try to focus more so on the client. Because, with debt in every industry, pretty much every industry, it's a forgotten word. It's under-resourced. It's often, a tiny part of a business that often gets forgotten about until it becomes a problem. For us as a company, we try to, what we think the industry might fall on, just because of what we've experienced, is that we need to give our partnership with our clients, make it easy for them to manage the relationship, which is kind of why we did a client portal, it makes the relationship really simple and easy to manage versus maybe someone else who doesn't kind of have that platform. So I think really just giving the client resource is the biggest thing, I think.
Yeah, and is that kind of what you think that some of the DCAs or the DCA industry is kind of missing? I mean, what do you think they're kind of missing that you think that we can sort of add on as a result?
So for me, it's if we're looking at the customer journey from onboarding with our client, for example. So let's say it's a loan or a credit card, buy now, pay later, whatever that initial product is. So what you're seeing a lot more digital journeys there, and they're very effective and they work very well. So from a customer point of view, I'm signing up online. I love the journey. I love the way it's gone. I utilize the product, but then I fall behind on my payments, and the options available to clients, they're sending those customers then to DCAs that will call them 3 times a day and send a letter. But this person's never had a phone call in relation to this particular company ever before at any stage in the life cycle. So that's out of place for that particular customer journey. But by aligning our approach and strategies and the digital element, we're finding ourselves we're fitting alongside and very nicely with that particular client type, because that's how their consumers and their customers have shown that's how they want to transact. So any other way is almost out of the norm for that particular customer. So I know if it's me, I very rarely speak to companies on the phone. So I know that if it were me, that's how I'd want to transact. So it's about making sure that those options are available to our clients.
Yes, so sort of things like buy now, pay later, some of the the app-based products that we see every day. I mean, it's trying to keep it in the same channel.
Yeah.
And I suppose one of the questions I have is, one of the questions I'm sure you're asked is around vulnerability. I mean, like, how do you deal with vulnerability? And there's always been a reliance in the industry to say, well, look, at the end of the day, we're going to have you talking with someone, right? So because as a human being, there's that sort of interaction that can sort of detect vulnerability. I mean, what's your kind of view on that in terms of like how you handle some of those difficult conversations?
Yeah, so I think obviously we've touched on how digital channels make it a little bit easier for vulnerable people in potential vulnerable situations to come forward and open the door to that conversation. So obviously there's that aspect to it. Alongside that, obviously the branding and language we use will put a lot of thought and effort to make the Digital DRA very warm and welcoming and as friendly as possible. Which again
kind of treat how you want to be treated is the essence.
So that then helps encourage that conversation. And then when we actually get into that conversation, I think it's important to remember that because I see a debate a lot about digital. Does that mean you lose the human touch? And not at all. Just because it's on a digital channel, it doesn't mean that we've lost that human touch, because it is still, like, for example, we don't use chatbots. So if a customer starts a web chat, through to one of our team straight away. So we're able to pick up that conversation and make sure that the questions they do have are getting answered as quickly as possible. And that goes for any digital channel, whether it could be an email. We want to get a response back to that customer as soon as possible. We don't want them to have to wait 24 hours, 48, maybe sometimes up to a week for a reply on an email. It's for us, it's about just treating people how we would want to be treated, and how we believe that they can expect to be treated as well.
And I suppose part of that's treating people the way they want to be treated and the way they expect it from a product point of view, right? So if I've signed up if I bought everything online and it's all been remote, then then obviously treating people in that same way and having quick responses and those kind of things.
And that's kind of how we're approaching it. And we're almost, I think Arren touched on it in terms of the partnership. We're almost see ourselves as an extension of our client. And the way that they would treat their customers, and we want to mirror that throughout that journey. It's not about passing your accounts over to the big bad debt collector anymore. It's about we potentially are better placed to help this particular customer in comparison to you. So let us do what we can.
So I think just adding to what Dan said, obviously I started off on the phone 10, 12 years ago, a long time ago. And the best conversations you had with people, whether it be over the phone or by email, were having open and honest conversations. People sometimes would be frustrated about being with a debt collection agency, but ultimately you manage to agree a plan which they can afford and they adhere to, or you can do the opposite, where you force them into a corner and they might settle for something they can't afford. And that's not doing right by you, or by the customer or by the client, because ultimately they might make the first payment, if you're lucky, default and never pay you again. So our ideology is that we approach the customer, we have an open, honest conversation with them, and try to get them into a plan they can afford and they can stick with. And I think that's why our portal, for example, isn't just the whole debt collection versus debt resolution. We're not focusing just on money. If we come to you, let's say, because the idea is, let's say, for example, I don't know, the financial services industry, and it's been through a standard internal process, and it gets passed to a debt collection agency. You're lucky if you get 10, 11% liquidation on it. So 11 accounts are going to recover out of every 100. But the problem is, what about the other 89? So if we then come at them with, you haven't paid, like, well, what if they're in a dispute? Let's resolve it together. Let's work together. Don't bury your head in the sand. It's about getting all that kind of language right so they can speak with you. And then they realize you are kind of mitigating and opening the door. And if you are struggling, fine, talk to us. Let's have a conversation about it and help you, resolve this. Because it is a burden. It does play on your mind. Debt. I've been in on debt before when I was younger, and whilst at uni, and it is something that does, bother you. But if you can have an open, an honest conversation with the company, it does help.
Yeah. And so do you think that's going to get more prevalent? I suppose we're just looking at the economics. I mean, so we're just about to go into the new energy tariff as well. I'm sort of very conscious of that today, and sort of like so we're all busy taking meter readings. But I mean, like, what do you think is going to happen sort of going forward with that? And what's the role you think that digital's got to play with that? I mean, because it could impact us from an arrears volume point of view.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is obviously we've been going since October. And some of the accounts that we were setting up plans in November, December, January, they've been contacting us, which is great because they feel comfortable doing that and saying, I can't commit to this plan anymore because it's unaffordable. My energy bills have quadrupled. We've had quite a high, I'd say 5%. We're about to renegotiate, which is great. We want them to talk to us. We're not here to ask us something you can't afford no more. But what was interesting was that a few people said, how do I approach my other debt collection agencies? And it's like they saw us as different, which is kind of nice. And hopefully make great marketing one day, but you can't put that kind of stuff online, unfortunately. But it was nice. But yeah, the digital debt resolution was kind of set up on the idea of there was going to be a lot of problems off the back of Brexit and the pandemic, never mind what's happened with the energy crisis and inflation. We think getting the language right is really important because I'll use my sister as an example. I've asked her if I could, by the way. Her bills for energy have gone up. I think it was £70 to 348. She's a single mother of two.
Yeah,
she can't afford it, and now she's like, what do I do? There's all this panic. Like, you can only pay what you can afford. Ultimately, you need to speak to them and pay what you can, and it's about keeping that door open. And that's what worries me at the moment, is that if the language isn't right, and you've got a choice of either paying your credit card or paying your gas and electric, you're going to pay your gas and electric, aren't you? And this is going to take a hit. But if you can approach them, so listen, we no time to changing. Let's speak to us, and we've already implemented a new strategy, being proactive with that and saying, we know things are difficult, speak to us, make us an offer, or can we refer you to, we work with PayPlan to help you, work out something you can afford. On our portal, we have a budget planner which works out something you can afford as well without you committing to a plan. And that way it's kind of doing a bit more than just shaking the tree, a bit further than what we should.
And so, and what new techniques do you think we're going to have to look at in terms of resolution? Because I mean, certainly the economic shock could be much bigger than we've seen it could be bigger than we've seen for many years, 20 years, maybe even bigger than 2008 to a certain extent. I mean, it's been talked about, and sometimes a little bit sort of chicken little with these things, expecting everything to go to fall down. But I mean, do you think there's new tools and techniques we need to look at over and above the standard plans or the standard forbearance or those kind of things? Do you think there's other ways we need to think about it?
I think for me, a lot of it ultimately depends on the relationship an outsourced partner has with their clients, because if you've got to be proactive with this, 'cause it's coming and it is going to financially impact a lot of people, and it's going to financially impact a lot of people that have probably never been in this position before. So if it's someone that's never been in debt before and never been to a debt collection agency before, if you just funnel all those people down the exact same strategy that you've always been doing, that it can't end well for that particular customer, because it's like that. It's from they're in that position from means that are outside of their control. So by being proactive with your client, you can almost you can do work on your strategy. You can start preempting some of these conversations. You can give customers the opportunity to talk and kind of tell their exact current circumstances, reduce payment plans, whatever it might be. It's if your client is willing to have that open dialogue with the outsourced partner first, then there's definitely ways and solutions that can be implemented to help people more.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's definitely I've chatted with people about, it's almost like that honesty in conversations in terms of like, what is the situation, what it really is the budget, rather than it being sort of like, you need to go here. It's around having that listening and the conversation, and having a bit of an honesty around where do people actually sit with their current budgets and their current situation, to then be able to work out such a solution, which I think sounds like that fits quite well with some of your ideas around resolution rather than collections.
100%, because yes, you can focus on payment all you want, but like Arren said, if they can't afford to pay the amount you're asking for, or the amount you think they should be paying, there's nothing you can do in that scenario to force them to pay that. So it's about being a little bit more proactive and listening and finding out, all right, how do we actually help resolve this account?
Yeah, because I think, on top of that as well, going back to what Dan said, people that have never been in debt, nobody understands debt collection. It's crazy, even now. So first of all, clients make a joke that we look like bailiffs, because we're quite big lads, which is quite funny. Obviously, we're not bailiffs.
We are in as matching tops today.
Yeah, and then on top of that, if I tell someone what I do, and this happened literally, I was playing paddle tennis last night, and I was explaining to someone who's got a business what we do exactly, and he's, I always explain it like, you go to this bank here, this bank, I won't name who they are, they chase it internally, and then they pass it to a debt collector and say, someone like us, obviously we're branded a bit different, and we'll send out, an automated strategy digital and try to get them to engage and speak with us and, come to a resolution. So I think I've explained it logically, and then they always say, I'd still pay you if you knocked on my door. I've just literally told you I'm not a bailiff, and it's this confusion. And I think that's where we're trying to change for us personally. I'm not saying it's probably, I always hear it was worse before, but there is still stigma associated with our industry. So if we can make sure that us as a brand are well aligned with the clients and being, friendly and approachable, that way these people that have never been in debt before do feel like they can speak to us, and it does work quite well. Because the last thing we want, things are going to get worse. Even the energy bills are going to increase again. I know it's October, but it'll still creep up. And the last thing we want is these people burying their head in the sand where they're not speaking with us. Because often with these things, we only have one time to speak to them, and if they don't resolve it, and we've had a bad experience with us, then they're never going to talk to us again, really. And it makes the situation worse for them, for us, for our clients. It's about getting it right at the first stage.
I mean, one of the trends I've seen, certainly in the creditors and the banks, etc., has been this almost like the collections piece seems to be getting close to almost like the customer care piece, or the resolution piece. And it seems like what you're sort of talking about and what you're trying to do is trying to do the same, but more from a DTA space. I mean, do you think that's sort of like reflective of just generally like we're all going into this one customer journey, and it's about holistic customer treatment rather than in life and then collections, or do you think we're always going to be separate?
Almost carrying on the brand values, and because they are still, even though they might have missed a couple of payments, they are still our client's customer at the end of the day. So it's almost, I was speaking to Arren about this the other week, because obviously within the debt collection agency, it's heavily focused around cash collected and liquidation rates. How can we improve liquidation rates? But we are starting to see more of the customer care and the customer relationship almost coming on par with, it's just as important as the cash collected and the liquidation rate you achieve. And how are we going to get to a point where the customer care and is more important than the actual cash collected figure, which I think we will start to get to that point, especially now.
Do you think there's a behavioural change going on, sort of almost like a generational change in terms of like how we interact with customers? It's almost like that being an advocate of the customer, which is what I think is what you're saying there. Sort of really sort of helps like get better engagement, and obviously helps from a business point of view, but it helps them as well. Do you think we're changing our relationships with companies?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 33, Dan's 26. I never answer the phone, and Dan never answers the phone to me anyway. Yeah. So it's not something I do, and I do everything on WhatsApp or web chat because it's on my own terms. If I'm at work, I'm busy, I'll do it that way. But I think, it's just convenience more than anything else. And also for me, I've got it in an audible thing I can use, because tends to be with web chat. Let's say for Sky, they always email you a transcript, so it's all fully logged. Whereas if I'm ringing someone, I have to go to a lot of effort to get that call recording should I want it.
Yeah.
So the digital journey does make it a lot easier for a number of reasons, really. But it's all in black and white then. Yeah. And I find if you're in a dispute, let's say if you're on the phone with someone for whatever reason, they're less likely to get into much of a conversation about it on web chat. It's just kind of factual, which makes it quicker than probably if you're on the phone. But yeah, I'd say definitely I agree with that.
Well, I suppose that helps with things like evidencing and controls and all of those kind of things. I mean, that can help because everything's recorded, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons we're digital only anyway, because one of the biggest factors of complaints is agent attitude on the phone, and if you don't have a phone, then it makes it a lot easier. But yeah, it works well for us. So if you've got anything to add, Daniel, like you're ready to say something.
No. I think you pretty much covered it. Put me on spot a bit then, didn't you? Sure, I'm listening.
You look like you're falling asleep.
The one thing I was going to talk about was asynchronous, right? So that's one of the things that comes up, which is like, do you have it when you sort of like, so you talk about WhatsApp, it's like, so you might send a text and then it might be like, 30 minutes later, you might then come back with something, right? I mean, that seems like that's a big advantage and a cultural change as well, rather than I'm going to talk with someone and I expect an instant response, right? So
that's a huge benefit from a customer point of view, because it goes back to, if they call me when I'm at work and I can't answer this call, I can't answer that call. But I could still, if so through WhatsApp, if I send a WhatsApp message, I go back to work and I carry on, and then I come back and I've had a response and I can do it that way. And so I'm managing and helping to resolve my account on my own terms, and it's convenient for me. Whereas your traditional, we'll call them 3 times and hopefully they'll pick up once, and when they pick up, we'll keep them up for 20 minutes. It doesn't work for a lot of people. They've got lives to lead. They've got kids to pick up from nursery. They've got work. You need to be able to give customers the convenience. Convenience is king.
Do you think it's also a reflection of like, just we all seem like much more strapped for time these days, right? It's kind of like that's almost like the new currency in some ways, and it's like anything you can do to, like, we're all multitasking and do multiple things at the same time, and customers are as well, right?
When we're designing these strategies, it's very important to not forget to put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
How would I react to that? Would I like that? Would I like my mom receiving that? It's I know it's funny when you say it like that, but it's true. I don't ever want to send a campaign out that I wouldn't be comfortable receiving, or any member of my family receiving themselves. It's that element. That's where the human touch comes into it. Even though it's digital, we haven't lost the human touch, and convenience is a huge part of that. Be considerate. Sympathise with people's current circumstances and their diary. What we don't know what they're doing on a day-to-day. We don't know how busy they are. They might be absolutely swamped. So give them the tools to be able to engage with us without interfering with everything else they've got to do.
And do you find some channels work better than others? I mean, do you look? I don't know what channels you look at, but do you find, like you got web chat, you might have WhatsApp, you might have a two-way SMS, you might have those kind of things. Versus, do you find some are preferred than others, or is there any kind of themes to kind of look at?
So every channel you've mentioned there, we do use. In terms of popularity, it differs because what we tend to see is your two-way SMS and your WhatsApps are more of, I'll send a message now, wait for a response and I'll reply in a couple of hours. Your web chat is, I want to speak to someone now and resolve it now.
Yeah.
So it really depends on there's quite a few factors. But one thing that we were quite surprised about is how popular WhatsApp actually is.
Right.
So WhatsApp's more popular than web chat for us.
And I suppose, how do you put that up against, I suppose, just almost like self-serve portal, I suppose, is the other one as well, isn't it? I mean, because a lot of people imagine just use that and they just want to do it. They can do it in their own time whenever they want to.
And the vast majority of people do that because our portal isn't just payments. You can do a lot more in there. And we've designed those journeys to make it as easy as possible for customers to do that without ever having to speak to us. And the vast majority of customers do that. And it's almost like the digital contact channels are complementary to that process.
Yeah, I think for us, it's, what I've not come across before, which what we did well was, the brand is really key for customer. Like our custom portal has its own marketing site, and usually it's just most of the industry, it just feels like it's just a homepage. But ours is a full marketing site designed to give the customer, to ease their fears, I guess, and also just make them relax. Giving you support, giving you control. And the idea is that they can do anything they would want over the phone or by any other channel on the portal, and it's also fully mapped out. So it's all about gaining trust. So if you raise a query, it'll go onto a query hold and you'll get an email saying, we've received your query, we'll get in touch with you. And that way it's fully audited as well. And the customer knows that we're taking whatever they've raised or queried, debt management, whatever, we're taking it seriously and we are dealing with it. Versus I think a lot of the market is just payment orientated, and that way they would want to ring in if they've got a query or a dispute. So we try to we have covered every angle that they could possibly want.
You talked about a very sort of human-centric approach from a collections point of view, although obviously you're very digitally based. I mean, there's been a lot talked about data and the fact that you can use data to sort of preempt some of this stuff and those kind of things. I'm quite interested to hear your views around how do you sort of match the use of data and getting more data and using the data to drive the process, particularly automated process, versus almost like a digital process, albeit a human process as well. I mean, what's your kind of view on where those two sort of interact?
I mean, everything you do on our system is logged. Everything the customer does. We look at why is the bounce rate on login, and we have recordings as well. So we look at why did the customer drop off this page? Why have they gone off here? Everything's kind of tracked, and we're always, we have like a continuous improvement program to try better it. And even to some, we'll approach customers and say, "Oh, we noticed you dropped off here. Is there anything we can help and improve on?" And kind of, so as an example, the payment plan is always the biggest one. That people drop off because it's it could be a pain, but we implemented open banking, which helps with that. It makes it from maybe a 3 to 5 minute INE throwing out to 10-15 second pulling the transactional data and working out the disposable income. But on the back of that as well, we have obviously we use the SFS statement for the INE, and we also have the flags built in the back of it. So if a customer, let's say it's Dan, a single father, he has his own place, but he's spending too much overall on his rent and his food and all that kind of stuff, well, he'd flag up on our system using the data, and we can approach him and say, okay, as part of this, you are spending more than what the industry recommends, and we challenge it in a polite way, or similar if it was too little. So we do use the data quite a lot to keep improving the system, and we have a lot of MI surrounding it as well. So
And you mentioned open banking. I'll just get your take on open banking. So there's a lot of ink has been written about open banking. A lot of ink was written around it, sort of like solving I&E as an example, particularly automating I&Es. I mean, obviously, I know we've got payments coming through as well. We can always already do payments, but there's variable recurring payments coming through. I mean, what's your kind of view on the state of the industry and the usefulness of open banking, particularly for collections?
So it was something I was quite keen on. Obviously, we're digital DRA, so we have to use the best, technology around. And how do you improve the customer journey? Well, open banking is huge, and we've got a great partner, and we're doing a case to do with them in, I think, September to prove, how it's performing. And initial thoughts on it are it's higher than we expected because we're quite lucky. 2 years ago, there wasn't much media around open banking, but there's been a lot of investment into various different firms. There's a lot of good publicity going around because people, if you don't understand open banking, you probably think, oh God, this is a bit intrusive. I've just clicked pay on the digital DRA and now it's redirected to my app. But if you don't understand it, you think, oh, they're gonna have access to my account, but we have a pop-up saying exactly what we do. We don't have access to that. You just make sure you've got the money in the bank to pay it. And then same on the I&E side. For me, it is the biggest drop-off. So it was like, well, how can we make it better? So we simplified it. So it's clear boxes, it's concise, but the open banking assessment is brilliant. I think we pull it on 6 months transactional data. And what we do is it's not been live for 6 weeks, that side of it. So it's a little bit of data, but already we're seeing that the ones that have been set up manually, where customers might not have all the information to hand to fill out a payment plan, versus the ones where it's based on open banking. So it's based on actuals versus estimates. You would expect the adherence rate or the kept rate to be a lot higher open banking, and we'll see in 6 months or early on we can see that it's having an impact. And I think for a customer it's probably a bit more eye-opening because you think you've got an idea of what you've got spare, but then this is actuals, and maybe it's a bit like, oh wow, I didn't realise that.
And do you think the digital approach kind of helps because you can get into quite difficult conversations when you actually look at people's real transactions in terms of what you're actually spending money on it, and it's always a bit of a shock if you look at your own bank statement, it can be a bit of a shock. Well, actually, I spend this much, getting to the supermarket or the off license, whatever it was, right? And it was like it could be a shock, right? And it's like, and that can lead to quite a difficult conversation for a lot of folks, right? And do you think the digital piece helps with that because it's kind of like it's in your face, but it's maybe a little bit easier to deal with?
You're probably more inclined to lie when if you was on the phone to someone and you're going to say, oh, I spend £200 a month on cigarettes and £300 a month on booze, something like, you'd probably be inclined to like, oh, I'll make it look lower and all this kind of stuff because you feel some people might feel embarrassed by that. Or on the flip side, they might say it and then the agent might challenge them on it, and then it straight away it's this clash and it doesn't work. But I think it does break down some barriers because it's easy to do as well.
Well, I think also, obviously, my prediction that we'll see it increase in popularity as obviously more customers become aware of what it is. But we're already starting to see lenders, for example, open banking is a must. So if you've got to do the open banking assessment before they provide the loan. So we'll start to see that grow. And the knock-on effect of that is we'll start to see it in our industry a little bit more as well because customers are used to it and they know what it is and what it can do.
That's interesting. So it's all super interesting, and so it's certainly huge amounts of development's been done, and it's sort of like you can see it moving forward. But my final question was a little bit around where do you think we go from here, right? So you're obviously at the forefront around putting digital processes in from a collections point of view, driving the driving the industry from that point of view. But I mean, where do we go in the next 5 years? What's the next thing for us to look at? Or what's in the back of your mind around where we go next?
Dan's good.
We can't tell you that. That's the bread and butter. Those are secrets. We can't tell you that. Everyone will be doing it then. We won't be leading the way anymore then. Someone might beat us to it.
So it's a watch this space rather than anything. We'll have to have another interview then. That's the thing.
Yeah. I'll have a podcast.
We'll have plenty to talk about over the next couple of years. That's the good news, I guess.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, guys, thank you very much, Dan and Arren. Really appreciate it. It's fascinating to chat with you and hear about some of the things that you guys are up to. So it's very interesting.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
really
appreciate it.
appreciate
Thanks a lot, Chris. It's been good chatting.
Cheers, Chris.